app here that does very little. We can type messages and have them show up on the screen. But that's it. We have a fake user, and it's always the same. So let's at least make a fake user who changes. Deal. So let's make a new component called sign in per the homework. I'll go ahead and make it a class. It's going to have a sign-in form on it, so it's probably going to have state. So let's import React and component from React. We'll make a class called sign-in that extends component. Before I forget, export default sign-in. I'll return some JSX. Oh, yeah, right. This is not stateless. So this all has to be inside a render method. Well, it's stateless, but it's not functional. And it won't be stateless for long. Right. So when it comes to making this thing look good, let's not worry about that for right this second. Let's just give ourselves an input that we can type a username into. That's what you're supposed to do, right? And then there you put a button. Who all did this? A few people did it, right? So did you make a form with an input and a button? Basically the idea. All right, I'll do that. Let's get a form in here. Let's put an input. Name equals, I'm going to sign in with email, not username. I know I said username, but we use the email for the avatar, so I'll say email. Placeholder email. Why do I keep doing that? We'll put a button, and it must be a submit type button, not a button type button. Let me make sure I didn't do that in the morning too. No, I did it right in this one. Okay, so whatever, sign in. And what did you put in state, Jake? Did you do anything in state here?
No, I didn't. I just kind of made it.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Ferris, what did you do state-wise? Whatever they type in, we put in state, right? That way we can do something with it. So we want this to be a controlled form. So let's do state equals. We could put a constructor, but we learned we don't have to, thanks to property initializers, a forthcoming standard. So state email, I guess. Why not? Initialize it to an empty string. So on our input, we need to put value equals this.state.email. And actually, instead of saying type text, I will say type email. That does do something in some browsers. It's basically just a text field, but now this isn't on the page anywhere, right? So for right now, long term, what we want to do is if you're signed in, we show main. If you're signed out, we show sign in. For right now, we don't have a way to do that yet, so I'm just going to go into app.js, and I'm going to put sign in here. I need to import it, of course. I'll import it before main. Not that it matters. Sign in from /sign in. And I will just comment out main for right now. I just use the command / or control / to do a comment. So notice what comments are in JSX. You put the curly braces to indicate this thing's a JavaScript expression, and then you use a C-style comment in there. Kind of silly, but that's how it's done. So not the prettiest thing in the world, and not something you want to do without your text editor doing it for you. So now we see our sign-in component. Can't type in there yet, right? What do we have to do to fix that? We'll make a method called handle change. And like all my methods now, I'm going to make it an arrow function. All my methods except render, I should say. I'll need my event object. And I'll say this.setState email is event.target.value. The target of the event will be the input, assuming that I actually put onChange here. So onChange equals this dot handle change. Right? And now I can type. And if I look at my dev tools, find my sign-in component, there's my state, and I see as I type, state changes. Cool. So what do we want to happen when we submit this thing? We want this user to change, right? So let's just start all this stuff as null. So when you're not signed in, these are all just null. We still have a user object. Now the only thing that is allowed to change the state of app is app itself, right? We can't change that state from somewhere else. So we're going to have to write the method to change that in here. So what do you want to call this? Sign in? You want to call the method sign in, or is that too many things called sign in? I want something like sign in at least, because this is what we're doing here. Yes, we are changing the email, but why are we changing the email? Because we signed in, right? Yeah, something like that would be good. I kind of like this may sound strange. I like handle auth. Handle authentication. Oh, what did I do? I didn't make it an arrow function. And we always run into trouble when we do that. And we probably better pass in the user object there. And I'll say this.setState user. So never mind the form for a moment. Let's see if we can make this much work. I said that if they're signed in, I want to see main. If we're not signed in, I want to see sign in, right? How can I do that? How can I do that in my render function?
So
Yeah, Ferris.
in this case, like, let's say you put like user as like the condition for the if, just user itself.
Uh-huh.
State that user, would
Uh-huh.
it be false at the moment? Is that a value of default?
So in the case of JavaScript, an empty object is true, unfortunately.
Okay, so you could do like not user.
No, because
Other way around.
so user will be true either way. So I could check user.email or something,
Oh, okay.
or user.uid or something.
User, like an object would always be true, as long as it's initialized with something.
Well, so right now, yeah. So right now it's null, right?
Yeah.
That's false. But if we change it to something, then it'll be a string, and strings are true.
Okay.
Yeah. So as long as email is there, it would be there. So we could just make a rule that you absolutely have to have an email address, or we could use UID if that's going to eventually be a thing.
Give it like an empty string value and do it that way, because an empty string would be false. So if they have a username, then I would return the main, like a JSX for the main, and then otherwise I'd return the
Okay.
text.
So we need some condition that tells us whether they're logged in or not, right? I'm going to go ahead and write that as a method just because. I'll call it signed in. And let's have it return true or false. So I think I'm going to say this.state.uid. So if this.state.uid is null, I know we're signed out. If it's anything else, anything truthy, then I know we're signed in. You could implement this differently if you wanted to. If you wanted to check username or something. But I like my idea, my condition down here actually saying if signed in, because that sounds better to me. And how you determine they're signed in, this is how I think I'm going to do it. It could change. But the fact that signed in is what we're checking is not going to change, so I'm going to make it a method. So how do I do it? Can I just put an if in here? No. Ifs aren't expressions. They don't return anything.
You could have if in there as a function. Like I put an if outside.
You put it in a function?
Yeah, and then I return different value.
Okay, so have a function that checks that thing and returns.
The render function. I mean, you could have a separate function for it.
Right. So you can have a function that checks the condition and then returns either the JSX for that element or the JSX for the other. Yeah.
Could you use like an is visible, true or false? I don't know if that would work.
No. So we could do something like that. We could use a function that returns something based on an if, or we could use a ternary. So ternaries, unlike ifs, do return something. They are expressions. You can put them on the right side of an equal sign, right? So how about that? I hope I'm telling the truth about if. I think so. Let me check that. Let's try if this dot signed in main. It's already complaining. Else sign in. Oops, I forgot my open close parens. Yeah, it's griping about this. Expression expected, yeah. Like I said, ifs are not expressions. So that didn't work. But a ternary should work. So what's my condition? Everybody know what a ternary is? It's like an inline if. Looks like this. So you put your condition. 3 is less than 5. Then you put a question mark. Then you put what it should return if it's true. And a colon, and then what it should return if it's false. You see that returns yay. That returns AUKUS. So it's a one-line way of doing an if, but unlike an if, it is actually an expression, so you can use it in cases like this. Use them sparingly. There are certain places where they actually make things easier, but a lot of times they just make things harder to read. So use them sparingly. Conditional rendering in JavaScript or in React is actually a pretty great way to do it. So once you get used to the syntax. So I'll say this dot signed in. That's my condition. Then a question mark. And what should happen if it's true. And then a colon. And what should happen if it's false. So I put a ternary onto 3 lines like that. So you can quickly see at a glance, this is my condition, this is the truth, this is false. So if I'm signed in, show main. If I'm not, show this. So that's the most concise way to do this, and I like this way. It does take getting used to ternaries if you're not used to them. So right now, I'm not signed in. We don't have the form hooked up yet, but let's not worry about that for the moment. Let's go to our React Dev Tools. Let's find our app component. So now that's $R. So I can say $R handle auth, which takes a user object, I think we said. Right? Takes a user object. So let's put something in there that has a UID and an email and a username. So UID equals, doesn't matter, 1. Username, dstruce. Email, dave@fretless.com. Shucks. Let's look back at our React Dev Tools. There it is. There's the user. $R.signed in. Returning undefined. It's still false. This.state.uid. It's this.state.user.uid. So see why I checked this before we hooked up the form? Because I screwed up at this stage. If I got through with all the form stuff before I ever checked it, I would assume that I messed up at one of those steps. But I messed up on something really simple here. This.state.user.uid. So let's try that again. Here I have app assigned to $R. $R dot handle auth. Pass in the user object, UID. Yeah, let's autocomplete that. There we go. So as soon as the user's there, it shows me main instead of sign out, instead of sign in. So that's pretty cool. So I can make the form do that. But we got it working in isolation at least. How do we make the form do that? Handle auth is the function that does it, right? So how do we get that into sign in? So I can pass in a prop called handle auth. This dot handle auth. So in sign in, that's there now. That's being passed in as a prop. So I'll make a handle submit method. Handle submit. It'll be an arrow function. So on my form, I will say on capital S submit equals this dot handle submit. And handle submit, we'll call this dot props, because this is a class, this dot props dot handle auth, passing in, well, we need to pass in a whole user object. So for right now, I'll just pass in like UID, something, anything. Username, I'm going to have to hard code that. Well, I'll just make that the email. I'll just make that this.state.email. And I'll make email this.state.email too. I know this isn't how logging in is going to work long term, but I just want to see the form actually work. Now I have the sign in page. Let's type an email address in there, d@d.com. And now I'm signed in as d@d.com. Got a totally different avatar. Type some stuff in, and it all goes through as d@d.com. Mm-hmm. Make sense? I wrote the handle auth function, and then I passed it in as a prop to sign in. Everybody understand why that works? How about signing out? All sign out needs to do is clear that out, right? Okay, so in our render function here, we say if we're signed in, show me main. If we're signed out, show me sign in. So that's what those lines are doing, those 3 lines. Those are saying if I'm signed in, show me this. If not, show me that. So when I first load the page, I'm not signed in, so nothing happens. When I submit the form, I am signed in, except I didn't put a valid email address. So then I am signed in, so it shows me main instead. So if I'm signed in, the definition of if I'm signed in is basically, is there a user in state? So that's what the if really is. If there is a user in state, show me main. Otherwise, show me the sign-in page. So we make sure that there's a function that puts a user in state. And that has to go inside app, because that's where state is. But we need to call that when the form is submitted, which is in sign-in.
That's the part I'm really lost in. So like, how does that? I'm not seeing the connection between.
Yeah. Okay. So whatever method changes state has to live in app. Get that?
Yeah.
But we need to call it from somewhere else. So anytime you need something from outside a component, you have to get it into that component as a prop. It's just like passing an argument to a function. So sign-in now needs to call a function that does not live inside sign-in. So it's the only way it can possibly get it is as a prop. And you can pass functions as props just like you can pass anything else. So that's what we're doing here. So when we render the sign-in component, we pass in a prop called handleAuth, and its value is this.handleAuth, which is the method. So that's how it gets in there. And once it's in there, it's accessible as this.props.handleAuth. So we just call it. Yep. So we can make another method that signs out. How about sign out?
Isn't that when the icon is pushed up in the top corner?
Yeah, we'll make it. We'll attach that to that icon. For right now, let's just make it work. So basically, I just want to do this set state back to a blank user, right? Like this. So I think I'd like to make a method that just returns a blank user. Blank user to just return that object there. And then sign out will just set state user back to this dot blank user. Now I'm going to actually have to have a constructor. So I have to call super, and this dot state equals user colon this dot blank user. I have a feeling user is going to have more fields than that long term. I don't want to have to change it 2 places, so I'll just do it like this. But if I can't call this dot something inside a property assignment, I'm going to have to use a constructor for that. Now I still screwed something up. I forgot my arrow. There you go. Yeah, Sam.
What's the benefit to just having a user with all fields as null as opposed to just setting user itself to null?
Because several places we're like taking that user object and saying like this dot state dot user dot username or something like that. So then we'd be trying to say dot username on null or on undefined or something like that. So it's helpful if it's at least an object. And if we're binding anything to it in a form, which I guess we're not, it could probably, you know what? It could probably be an empty object. Let's try that. That would be easier. And
I'm getting an error on my, well, this is that state equals user, this dot blank user. I'm getting an error on my second this.
I'm second this.
This is a reserved word.
Okay, give me just a second here. Let's see if we can just set it to an empty object without any negative consequences. I think we might be able to get away with that. So let's try that. Yeah, that actually works. My avatar is screwed up now. Let's try here, d@d.com. Oh, there we go. Okay, just didn't have one for that. Okay, yeah, we can totally just set it to a blank thing. So never mind blank user. The way we wrote it this time, we don't need the fields to already be there.
Is it like good for readability to keep that or
No,
no?
I think this is fine. Just keep it an empty object. There's no reason we need those. With the app we usually build, we do things a little differently, and we would need that, but we can simplify that here. So I guess I don't need a constructor after all. You can keep it if you want. Doesn't matter. Don't need a constructor yet. Okay, cool. So now we have a sign out method that's not hooked up to the button yet, but let's see if it works. Let's select app here. So now it's $R. So $R dot sign out. Yep, and we're back.
How did you get it so that the email shows up next to the avatar rather than the username?
All I did was, when I sign in, I just set username equal to this.state.email. It is the username. I just set the username to the email for now.
Okay.
Because why not? That's interesting. Form submission canceled because the form is not connected. I still, $R still set, yeah. $R dot sign out. I'm back here. I sign in. I get this warning. If I put a prevent default, that probably wouldn't be there, but when you do a controlled form, you don't need to do that. But I bet if we, oops, wrong event. I bet if we put it here, it would go away. It did that time, but let's make sure if we do it again. $R dot sign out. Do it again. Yeah, that warning goes away. So we have a sign in, sign out flow. The sign out function works, but it's not connected to the link yet, right? That's the sign out link up there. So how do we do that? The only component that can run sign out is app itself, right? Because that's where the user is. So if we want to do that from that link, we got to go pretty deep. We got to go from app to main. From main to sidebar, user is this.props.user, sign out equals this.props.sign out. In sidebar, I have my props here. The only other prop I'm using right now is user. We could destructure this. We could say user, comma, sign out if you want. And user info is where our sign out button is. So in this one, we could do sign out equals sign out. And this is no longer props user. This is now user because I destructured it. And then in user info, I'm now passing in a prop called sign out. And here's my sign out component. So it needs a function to do that. Sign out equals sign out. And then in my sign out component, here's the actual button. Here come my props. I've got the prop sign out. So here's my button. On click equals this dot sign out. No parentheses. This better work. w@w.com. Ready? Oh, gosh. Cussing dang it. Why not? Yeah.
You wrote this.
I did write this. That's an easy one. Good. It's not this dot sign out. It's just sign out. w@w.com. We have a, thank you. We have an authentication flow. The users are all fake, but by golly, we have that happening. And we're checking them, and whoever we're signed in as is who we write things as, u.com.
So what did you write in each thing and pass it on down, like starting with the thing? Well, it's following it, but
Yeah, can you just start from the beginning? What is React? Yeah, no, look at. I'm sorry. Don't mean to tease. So where did it start from? So here's sign out, right?
yeah.
So first we have to go through main. So sign out prop is this dot sign out, because inside app it's this dot sign out. Main is a class, so it's this dot props dot sign out, and we pass that to a sign out prop to sidebar, right? So sidebar is this dot props dot sign out. And then I actually changed sidebar to destructure my props. So I changed the function signature up there to have curly brace user comma sign out. And I do that from now on. So when I pass that to user info, I say sign out just equals sign out. Yep. If it's anything other than a string, if it's any kind of variable or anything, you got to have curly braces in a prop value. And user info, do the same thing. We extract the sign out prop using destructuring, pass that as a prop to the sign out component. You dig? Okay, implement authentication workflow. So we've got the whole sign in, sign out process happening. It's just not for reals. And it's kind of pointless because now, sure, we can add messages as different users, but they keep going away, right? Okay, so what happens now? I'm u@u.com, I sign out. Now I'm a@a.com, and they're all gone. All my messages are gone. So what's the point of that? We need these things to hang around.